Hello and welcome to a CX Moment. In this series, we chat with companies about what's happening with their business, their support centers, and their customer experience. If you want to catch up on any of our previous episodes, check out our Zendesk YouTube channel and you'll find our conversations with Slack, Stitch Fix, Box, and others. I'm Sarah Reed from Zendesk, and today we're joined by Jennifer Routledge and Courtney Chartrand from Shopify. We'll be tackling all the fun and challenging customer support issues, but this time we're chatting about customer retention, employee engagement, cost reduction, and more through the lens of a BPO partnership. So if you're working with an outsourcing partner or are considering one, this is the conversation for you. On this episode, we're going to do things just a little bit differently. We're pre-recording and we're taking our questions live during our Let's Talk Change event. So if you're joining us for that event right now, put your questions in the chat, put them in the chat throughout the course of this broadcast, and we're going to answer them as fast as we can. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Hey, how are you today?
Hi, Sarah. Great. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you both. You are both up in Canada, correct?
Yes.
Pretty close to the Shopify headquarters?
I'm closer, actually. I'm very close to Canada's capital in Ottawa.
And East Coast. I'm in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Excellent. So we're hitting a few different time zones then today. But let's talk briefly about how your teams are organized, because I'm very fascinated about what your support structure looks like. So Jennifer, do you want to kick us off with that?
Yeah, for sure. So at Shopify, we have what we would say as internal support and then our vendor support. So our internal support are actually Shopify advisors that work around the globe. We have hubs in several locations, 2 in Canada, 1 in Eastern Canada, 1 in Western Canada. We'd have a hub that we would consider in Ireland and 1 in New Zealand. So that would be our internal support. Now, folks in those regions could work or live anywhere in those regions. So the Canada East region could be anywhere, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, and same with the other regions. So it's not, you don't have to actually live in a specific town to work for Shopify. And then we would have what we would categorize as our vendor network. So we currently have 2 vendors that we deal with. We operate in 5 sites, and we have 3 separate geographies where we operate with our vendors currently. So my team manages, so we have a team that I would focus on, and we would manage all of our vendor network. And then each of our geographies have like a senior lead as myself, and they lead the geography with all of the folks that are underneath them.
And is there a different type of support that comes into your vendors versus your internal?
So we offer exactly the same support. We indicate as, we call it frontline support, which we're the main line of defense or the main line of questions for our merchants. So when they contact us via phone, chat, or email, they could get an advisor from any of those areas.
And Jennifer, how do those internal and vendor teams work together? Like how, and maybe Courtney, you want to jump into this one, like how, where does one stop and one start, or, you know, do they collaborate on anything together?
It's been an interesting road for us. So we've had one of our vendors, which has been with us for about 4 years. And then our second vendor just started with us with the training class in November. It's probably been, whenever you outsource, there's always that push and pull between your internal guys and your vendors and your internal guys. You know, there's always a little bit of that, especially from your internal guys, because they, you know, we want to keep everything in-house. But Shopify is very unique in that, especially in the last year or so, we've really been able to have our internal folks and our vendors work together in multiple projects. We have some escalated support calls that would go to our vendors. Those teams, any tier 2 teams that we have, they all work really, really close together. when it comes to collaborating and being in Slack together and just using each other as resources to be able to get really good information. So I think that we're really trying to close the gap between the two, because there's so many things that we can each learn from each other. Most recently, we've been, as I'm sure you're aware, and other folks that have vendors are aware, we've moved a lot of our agents to a work from home environment at our vendors. We had really awesome collaboration with our internal teams and our vendor teams, because Shopify, of course, is 100% work from home environment for our support. So we were able to use, a lot of our squad leads and some of our other leadership to be able to really help with something that was new to our vendors. So just a lot of, cross collaboration meetings, and really just sharing best practices.
Anything you want to add to that, Courtney?
Absolutely. I think the collaboration is a big part of it. And we, because we're all over the world, and no matter when you call Shopify, you could get, a support advisor from Canada, or one from, the Philippines, wherever. It's important for us to work together and collaborate for our merchants, right? So regardless of where you are, we're doing the same job. We have the same end goal. And I think we feel that. And this work from home shift was definitely highlighted that for me. Like, our internal teams really wanted to help. Like, we're the experts at work from home. Let us help them. And it was just so wonderful to see them jump in and offer help and bridge the gap a little bit.
You mentioned the Philippines, and interestingly enough, I just had a conversation with a friend of mine there a couple of nights ago, and she was talking about some of the challenges that they're undergoing because of the heavy restrictions that have been put in place because of COVID-19. And how did you overcome the very heavy lockdown that they're all under, and how did you get people appropriately at home? How did you get them equipment?
That's a big story.
I'll probably make it sound really simple, but if you ask the folks over there, it was definitely a lot more complex, and they're still dealing with it today. So when I tell the story, it's interesting the way I tell it, because I wasn't there living and breathing it, but we obviously did what we could to support them. We had two separate experiences. We had our first experience with our folks that were in the Manila area. So we have a site in Manila, and we have a site in Pampanga, which is otherwise known as Clark. They're about, depending on the day and traffic, it could be anywhere from half an hour to 2 hours away from each other. But and then we have our third site, which is in Cebu. So Clark and Manila were in the same area, so they went under lockdown first. And the lockdown, it was around March 15th, March 16th area. We actually had been preparing for this for a while. We had folks that were over in Cebu launching our new vendor that was there. Courtney was actually on the ground there, and so she can tell you a little bit about her experience. So we actually sent them home early. We got them to come back in January. They were supposed to stay well into March, but we didn't know what was going to happen. So we made a decision to send all of our Shopify folk that were on the ground there home. So we had started to plan for this probably at the end of January into February, and work from home is so new over there. You don't have very many BPOs that were working from home, or vendors that were working from home. So it was all new for everybody. We thought we had a little bit more time to be able to kind of figure things out. So we had got to the point where we were like testing home internet, trying to work on our plans with how we were going to get everything deployed to the advisors over there. Most of them they come to work on jeepneys or buses. So we knew that we couldn't actually send computers home with them in those situations. So we were kind of working through those logistics. And then on a Monday morning, I'll never forget, it was Monday morning, my time. So Monday night in the Philippines. And that was when the president declared these very strict lockdowns in Manila and Clark. So it was very challenging for us. We only had probably 5% of our staff in either building at that time, because we were in between shifts. So it was a matter of how do you get things out? How do you deploy? How do you get things out? Anybody that was over there at that time will say there was so little information coming in. We didn't know if people were going to be able to come to the office. There were roadblocks set up. Every roadblock you went to was telling a different story. They would let you into the area where our contact centers were. They wouldn't let you in. It was crazy. So that first week was really challenging in getting computers out to everyone, and we didn't get them all out right? We got a certain percentage out on day one. We knew that there were certain time periods and certain things that needed to be covered that only this vendor covered. So we focused on that, but it was a challenging time. So that was okay. What happens in the heat of things, right? How do you do that? And then once we got home, we realized everything changed. So you go from an office environment into a working from home environment, a complete shift. So we were dealing.
All of your processes have to change. All of your policies, have to be adjusted in order to accommodate, particularly home environments where people are not necessarily set up in their isolated, perfect office space, right?
Multi-generational homes, things like that too, right? Like everybody's situation is definitely unique. It was interesting to our other vendor. I was on the ground at the time when Shopify made the choice to send us home, and I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, things are getting pretty serious here. And while I was thankful to come home safely before the gates really shut down, it was we had planned to be there for an extra month to help our vendor launch, and help them get off the ground and leverage some of a small team of Shopify leads that went with Jen's team. And so it was a sad goodbye to say, hey, we're leaving, and we obviously made a quick shift to finishing out that support of launching them through remote, which then led us to teaching them, work from home and how do you coach your people when you're used to sitting next to them and now you've got to, use Zoom or things like this and really think outside the box, which our vendors are really great at doing. And again, that collaboration that we have with them really shined through that experience, and we just worked very quickly and thrived in the change as much as we could.
I want to dive into a couple things around like the training and the communication, but what I also hear is how fortuitous it was that you had vendors already in place, that you had these BPO partners to really help with the volume, and also it sounds like it was very beneficial for you to have multiple locations so that you weren't completely dependent on one location, one government, one type of restriction. Is that now something you would recommend to everyone who's thinking about going into an outsourcing relationship? Is like, you might want to divide up where your support actually happens?
Yeah, I think everybody's different, and those are decisions that we're very new at the outsourcing world. So like I said, we've really only been outsourcing for 4 years, which is fairly, that's a short period of time. And we're still really in the process of what's our strategy from a vendor perspective? What geos do we really want to be in? What's important? What areas do we, for us, it's a language play as well. What languages do we need, and where do we really want to be able to make sure that we can service our merchants when they need us? So I think people really need to take a look at that. And who would have thought we would have had a pandemic? Like, no one ever would have thought 6 months ago we would be where we were. So, we've had to maybe relook at. So we're relooking at now, and we'll continue to look at, like, what is our strategy, and how does, if this happens again, what if we don't get fully back in the offices until 2022 or halfway through 2021? So what do those strategies look like? So I think everybody just is relooking at what is their play, and where does it make sense to be?
And you mentioned strategy, because I think having a BPO strategy before you even consider an outsourcing partner is so imperative, because I ran BPO teams in the Philippines and down in Central America for a lot of years. And one of the things that was always very frustrating to me and my teams were when companies would come to us, when brands would come to us and say, hey, this is a cost reduction play only. Like, I need to save money, and so I'm coming to you. How much money can you save? And that's the wrong strategy, or at least it shouldn't be the only strategy. Why? So walk me through what were the components of your strategy to go offshore.
So one of the main reasons why we decided to go offshore is we operate 24/7, 7 days a week, right? So a lot of it had to do with, we want to make sure that our merchants are serviced at those times of the day, right? So the Philippines for us, obviously 12 hours difference between Eastern Standard Time. So while we were sleeping in Canada, they were awake overnight servicing our merchants. So we wanted to make sure that because before that, we had always had our internal guys work the graveyard shifts, so they worked the overnight. But Shopify is really, really big on family and work-life balance. So it was a good play for us and a good decision for us to be able to go to another geo that was their daytime where they were working those hours for us. So that was one of the major pieces why we decided to outsource. A couple of the other ones were the flexibility that we have with our vendors. So vendors are very flexible. They can change shifts very quickly. They can hire, we had a lot of flexibility to be able to hire, hire quickly for us. So there was a number of different reasons. I mean, cost played a small part, but more so for us, it was some of those other things that it would give us to be able to help support our business and support our merchants.
I love that answer. And yes, cost should be a component, but it's usually one of those things that comes because of you not having to staff your teams 24/7 and you not having to spend additional money on multi-language in Canada where you can get it much less expensively elsewhere. All right, Courtney, I want to dive into some of the things around training. Like one of the things that people feel somewhat hesitant to utilize an outsourcer for are some of those more delicate things like customer retention. And now more than ever, I think all of us are, we're concerned about our customers and we're concerned about some of the challenges that they're having. Do your partners focus on customer retention? And if so, how do you train them so that they feel that same loyalty and that desire to help that customer like your internal teams do?
I think it starts with Shopify being merchant first, always. Like Shopify, like our merchants are our lifeblood, and we put them first always. And I don't know that our training is the same. We invest heavily in training. It's ongoing. We're always, leveling up our people and finding ways to train them. Things happen very quickly at Shopify. There's a new feature, a new thing, so we're always learning. And we're in a growth mindset, environment all the time. And our vendors are wonderful at taking our training and actually, adapting where they need to for previously it was an in-person training, but they get the same training and they get that same, exposure to merchants that all of our advisors do. And as far as the customer retention, like Shopify believes that, all of our every interaction, our goal is to, of course, answer their questions, but it's to help merchants succeed. We help them grow their business. We arm all of our front lines with resources and the ability to have the conversations to help merchants, listen to merchants. What do they actually need from Shopify? What are we not providing for them now? And what's their plan? What's their for the next step to grow their business? If they don't know, great, we'll start to help them there. We invest heavily in training, but also training merchants, right? We have a wealth of resources and communities to empower our merchants, and really our front lines are teaching those merchants how to fish and figure those things out for themselves. So every support interaction we have, we're not necessarily trying to retain a merchant, but trying to show them all of the things that Shopify can offer to help them grow their business. And we listen. Merchant feedback is so important. Our front line is absolutely, the voice of the merchant for us as well. So we listen to their frustrations, their feedback, and we take that. There's many teams at Shopify that take that feedback and implement it wherever we can to make Shopify better and to make commerce better for everyone.
And now that you're pulling in all that great information from your merchants, how do you then disperse it unilaterally across all of your sites and all of your teams to make sure everyone knows what that feedback is and what any potential changes are in your processes or your policies? Because you have a pretty complicated infrastructure across all of your sites.
We do, and we have some processes in place to ensure that feedback is tracked. and noted, and we have teams that, you know, look at all of that feedback and, you know, build or look for other options. And our software is really good at actually leveraging that feedback that we receive to find workarounds for instance. Like maybe this isn't possible right now, but let's work together to and we share that stuff. You know, we believe in, like, you know, doing things like that and sharing with each other, so that ongoing learning that I was talking about earlier is a big part of that. You know, a lot goes on at Shopify, but we do a pretty great job of communicating what's new, what's coming, and making sure that our front line has the ability to really teach our merchants about that. So we have definitely internal processes in play, and merchant feedback is a very important thing to us, and it's noted on every interaction.
Jennifer, you mentioned that you've only been outsourcing for 4 years, but that's still a pretty substantial amount of time to accumulate a lot of learnings. And, you know, what advice do you give to someone who is currently considering bringing on an outsourcing partner?
So the most important thing for us and for me when we go look for a vendor is they have to have the same values as we have. So Shopify is a very unique company. So we look for partners that are very similar to us, that have the same core values, that have the same culture, that really care about the things that we care about. So I think when you're looking for, if you're looking to outsource, you have to make sure that you match your culture. The one thing that our partners do a really great job at is we may not be their biggest clients, but we feel like we're their only client, right? And that's really important that you have when you're going to look for outsourcing, that someone gives you that feeling, because you don't want to be a number. And I have been in different organizations before where I have felt like that, right? Not a big player, didn't get the attention. So you have to make sure that the company that you're choosing to outsource is going to make you feel like that. And innovation's another one. Our partners are great at coming to us with ideas on different ways that we can do things. And they add a lot of value to Shopify in general with what we can do, because they've been in this, and let's face it, most outsourcers have been in this industry for years and years and years, and can add so much value, and just their experience can help with all of that. But for me, the number one thing is the culture piece. You have to get someone that matches your values, and that takes it a long way.
Now, in this, I would expect that you find a bit of that culture. Certainly, you can tease some of that out in the RFP process, but you also really get that culture when you meet with your potential outsourcing partners for those first few times to gauge. Now that you can't do that, how can you ensure that the culture piece is genuinely there?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, for us right now, we have 2 vendors at this particular moment. And the director of support and we have been to see a lot of locations for both of those vendors. So we have taken, numerous trips around, and we spend a lot of time with their leadership team. So for the folks that we have a pretty good idea of what their culture is. But from hey, I need to choose a vendor now during this time, I feel like you have to rely a lot on, reputation and kind of gut feel. But to me, it always starts with their leadership team. I think that's one of the most important things. We do spend a lot of time, and we have spent a lot of time when we go to visit their sites with the agents and the advisors themselves on different programs, because that's where you really get, it's one thing that, the higher level folks say that this is happening, but when you talk on the ground to those people, that's another way that you can understand the culture. So that's always really important for me too, when we do any of these site visits. But it's hard. I mean, it is hard during this. It would be hard during this time to choose another vendor. But there are some awesome vendors out there. You just have to, like you said, you just need to make sure that you're doing the right things and checking all the boxes when you bring them on board.
So it's certainly not impossible. It's just like everything right now, where it's just slightly a bit more challenging. Well, we are getting near time, so I have a couple more questions, though, that I want to address. One of them is around the channels that you have selected for your merchants. And do you find that the channel, regardless of what it is, that all of your centers utilize those channels or support those channels the same, or is chat better in certain countries or certain cities? Is it messaging better? Like, do you see any difference?
Yeah, it depends on what the merchant need is. So right now we're doing a lot of chat, and we have quite a bit of email coming through us. It really just depends what the merchant wants, because we want to be there for our merchants and service our merchants when they need us.
And where they want.
And where they need us. As far as our advisors around the globe, they all do the same thing. They all do the chats, the phones, and the emails. So depending on the time of day, if it's night and you want to have a call back and it's the middle of the night, you can have that call back from one of our advisors. Just because we just make sure that we're available whenever our merchants do need us.
All right, so last question, and I'm going to ask it to the both of you. What is one Zendesk tip or trick that's really helped your advisors or helped your merchants along the way, and something that you'd like to share? Courtney?
This is a me question, Sarah. So I started as a support advisor, and so I very quickly learned that this was a great tool. So yes, it's where I'm actually doing the work, but I actually learned a lot from these vendors. So I learned to use parameters, and learn to use the search function actually to find, maybe I learned a good answer on a previous ticket from somebody else or things like that. And I would actually add tags to my own interactions, track my own opportunities to learn something. Like if I had a really complex issue, it's going to go up to somebody in tier 2 or tier 3, so very technical. Maybe I wasn't the person to solve it, but I could track that and I could go back and learn from it. So I think it made me a better support advisor. And then when I made the switch to lead, obviously having the ability to see your people's work in real time, and we definitely leverage the organization options of Zendesk in order to really focus on your small team, but also see the whole of Shopify. How many merchants are waiting for us to talk to us, and we can make decisions within our small teams to make sure that we help our merchants the right way.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that. Anything you want to add to that, Jennifer?
No, I would just agree with that. Our advisors actually heard a funny story the other day from one of our vendors. They, we're trying to make sure that our advisors are following the steps they need to when they help one of our merchants. And one of them said, well, you know what? I just get them to put every single thing that they do in Zendesk in internal notes from point A to point B. I just get them to put them in internal notes, because Courtney and I were looking at them the other day and we're like, why is there 30 lines of text, not 30, but why was it 15 lines of text? And they were like, because they were putting every single thing, they were linking Google cards into it and everything so that they could show their work with what they had done for that merchant. So I think our advisors really like the flexibility of the tool, and I have focus groups on a regular basis with them. We always say, what can we improve about it? And they actually, don't give it, little things here and there, but overall, I think that they're pretty happy with it. So.
Well, thank you. And we appreciate your partnership. And that's actually it for today. And I want to say big thanks to Courtney and Jennifer for sharing your expertise. I personally love talking about BPOs and outsourcing. So this was a very fun, fabulous conversation for me. And I want to thank everyone for sharing a moment with us. Please stay connected with Zendesk and the rest of our community. And remember, you can find more of our conversations out on YouTube. With that, be safe, be helpful, and we'll chat again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks. Bye. See you later.